Good evening, all. You're very welcome to our podcast this week. And our special guest is Seamus Lowry, who is brand ambassador and key account manager with Bushmills and Proximo Spirits. And it's ironic that last week's guest is actually filling the role that Seamus had previously. So they both know each other very well. So I hope you're keeping well and keeping safe. It looks like there had been some progress on the COVID front, but we seem to be regressing. But hopefully, the future will be a little bit rosier. I hope we'll hear some news in the next couple of days from our government and see where things lie. So, like I said, no news this week, and we'll just get straight into it. I'm delighted to welcome Seamus into the show. So if you have any questions, please do let us know. And please hit the subscribe button and follow us as well, please. Thank you. Seamus, good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
Welcome to my bunker in Connemara.
Very nice. Yes, you're out there. Out west is best. Is that right?
Is there any other way?
Yes, out west is second best. So I can't disagree with that. But look, you have a lovely Galway hooker boat there in the background as well, and a few of your portfolio that you look after. How have you been keeping?
Yeah, I've been keeping well, thank you. Trying to keep busy, trying to stay active.
Yeah, a different type of busy.
Learning to adapt to a digital busy.
Yeah.
You know yourself from this kind of activity. It's a strange new world, but I've personally learned a lot in the last year, to be honest. So it's been interesting. It's been difficult. I mean, let's face it. The industry I'm involved in terms of I work in the on-trade, has probably never seen the likes of this before. Closest thing probably is prohibition in the US in the 1920s in terms of total closure of trade. So. It's been difficult, but we're a resilient bunch, I think. So I think we'll bounce at some stage back out of this.
Yeah, obviously you're no stranger to this online presence in terms of giving Zoom calls, or in this case, a StreamYard kind of presentation. How do you find that? What do you get out of it that you wouldn't get in person, and vice versa?
It's difficult, I suppose. You feed off the energy of a crowd when you do a tasting, and we've met each other at various tastings, whether they're Bushmills ones or they're tastings with other distilleries, and you feed off the energy of the public. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why I got into this, because I love being asked questions, I love being challenged, I love the fact that people want to know more, and the hunger is there, and you miss it initially from this type of format, that it can be daunting because you feel like you're talking to yourself, and that first sign of madness is when you start talking to yourself. So it's getting used to that format. But once you get used to it and you engage, I found it more engaging in terms of I've more of a relationship, maybe is the best word, that with people that are engaged with Bushmills or engaged with Irish whiskey, because they directly message you when they have a question. And it seems to happen all the time now, and it's incredible. It's not a patch on being face to face, talking with people and engaging with people with your brands. But if you're going to talk to someone, the human nature will find a way, and we found a way.
Well, I see a couple of brand ambassadors here. Dave Cummins from Dingle and Conor Ryan from Pierce. I know you have a great relationship with all the brand ambassadors, and in fact, from the response we got from having you on the show, you're quite a well-known figure there, Seamus. So, I suppose you've been in the industry long enough as well.
Well, yeah. After 19 years, you tend to get known, whether for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. I'm really lucky that anyone I've met, I've created great friendships. Dave, you mentioned there, and we'd meet at festivals and things. And Connor, I know him since I worked in Irish Distillers with cocktail competitions of various formats and sizes with the Folk House in Kinsale. So, you get to meet guys. I mean, like on the street, we're kicking the shins of each other for our commercial lives, but behind the scenes, it's we're good friends and we work in the same business. I think the whiskey business, because of its nature, it's very important to understand how everybody does their individual thing and understanding the story right. Because if competition wasn't good, then we wouldn't have a business. Nearly all the whiskies that I've tasted so far that have come off this island have been really, really good. So it's a really heartening sign. And these guys have got great jobs ahead of them because the industry is growing.
Yeah. Oh, it is an active industry. And certainly as a consumer, the more rivalry and more competition amongst yourselves, I suppose, the better for the industry and for the consumer at the end of the day. But you're based out there in Connemara. And I was admiring you sent me some of your photos there that I was admiring, and it's a nice neck of the woods out there. And just share. You're actually specifically Roundwood you're from, aren't you?
Roundwood's in Wicklow. I'm from Roundstone.
Roundwood is down the road. Roundstone is across.
Yeah, Roundwood's down the road. That's the village of Roundstone. I was born and raised in Roundstone, in the middle of the city centre. Woods' shop in Roundstone. That's my parents' home. So nice. Christina and Seamus. So yeah.
A typical Irish Weather's Day.
That is only a couple of weeks ago.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, we're. It was one of those non-snowy type days that we got in between. That's a friend of my brother's took that picture. He's a business, Conor Vaughan. He has a drone which he makes good use of. That's Maureen. We went up there for my youngest son's confirmation.
Right.
He couldn't make his confirmation on the day he made it because of COVID. So we were within the county restrictions, and Maureen is in Recess, which is halfway between where I live, Upterard, and where I'm from, Roundstone. So it's a beautiful spot. That
certainly looks it in these photos anyway. It looks like. Now, Loch Corrib, I'm semi-familiar with, and Oughterard, like I mentioned to you, I think earlier before we started the show. I've been on that lake doing a bit of fly fishing myself, and it's a beautiful neck of the woods. And it's unfortunately can't make it there this year. Yeah,
it's a tonic. I grew up fishing. My granddad was a fisherman. And he used to bring me fishing on his curragh, and that's where I got that, I suppose, braw for the water and for boats, and he was an islander from Inishlacken off Roundstone. So I just gravitated towards it. Yeah. And I'm if I'm not in a whiskey distillery, if I'm on a boat, that's probably where I'm most happiest. Yeah, to be honest.
Your role as it stands now with Bushmills, it's partly brand ambassador, but mostly key account manager. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And what's the link, if you like, between the hierarchy between Proximo and Bushmills? Then you might want to explain that to our listeners.
Well, firstly, my job is I'm actually a key account manager. But when I worked for Irish Distillers, I had a dual role, which I was whiskey ambassador and a key account manager. And when I started with Proximo, or with the Bushmills Spirits Company at the time, before it fully became part of the Proximo family as such. I worked as a key account executive and then became a key account manager. But this whiskey ambassador thing seemed to follow me. People seem to want to listen to what I had to say about whiskey, which to be honest, I was happy to talk about it because it's pretty much like a busman's holiday for me because I enjoy the industry. So key account manager in the on-trade specifically and specialist retailers. So I would kind of try and sell my wares basically at a group level to various different customers across the island at the time. And then we got a man in Galway, and then we got a man in Cork, and that let me be in the Northwest a lot more. So and really what I would do is go in to be an alternative and strive to be the alternative to whatever the pouring whiskey may be in that house, whether it be Jameson, whatever it may be. But also fleshing out business for our other brands, which is obviously Jose Cuervo Tequila and 1800 Tequila and Kraken Rum. So whiskey is one string to my bow. But obviously, I do a lot of the people would see me as a whiskey ambassador more so than what I get paid to do, which is a key account manager.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would have come across you so many times at tastings, I suppose, and at Whiskey Live, of course, which again we're missing out on. But it goes to show the reach that Bushmills have. We have people here from Russia, from the States, from Italy, from Germany, all over. So you're all very welcome. And
it's fantastic because for me with Bushmills, it's been a long story. I mean, I've seen it kind of go through, you've seen it go through various phases, and we're really seeing it's pretty much like the way yeast grows. We've gone from our lag stage into our growth stage. It's we're fermenting well, basically, to put it into whiskey terms. Yeah,
I mean, there was a time there that I was frustrated and concerned, if you like, because everybody that knows anything about whiskey knows of Bushmills and knows what it's capable of producing and knows its heritage. But there's kind of been that layer of mystique about Bushmills as well, that maybe it wasn't as open and there wasn't so much, liaison with the customer as there is now. And I can see that it's changed a lot in the last certainly 2 or 3 years, but I mean, there were seedlings of that before that also. But before we get into all of that, Seamus, I just want to tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how you first got into whiskey, what your first recollection of whiskey was.
My first recollection of whiskey, well, there was always, not that there was a lot of whiskey in my house, but there was always whiskey. My grandfather liked, he drank Powers.
Right.
So always at Christmas time, there was always a smell of hot punch, as he would call it.
Yeah,
we call it hot whiskey now, but it was a punch for anyone that came into the shop at Christmas to do their shopping, the big shop before Christmas, and you would always get that smell of sweet whiskey in the air because the kettle be on. He'd usually sometimes make it with sugar or he'd make it with honey, and it'd be very simple, it'd be very well done, and that's kind of where I learned. And it always came with the air of caution, be careful with it. It was the word, always be careful with it. Never go too heavy, never go too. It's something to watch, and I took that with me. And the first time I ever served a glass of whiskey was in 1995 on St. Patrick's Day in O'Dowd's Bar in Roundstone, and I was asked for a half one. And being naive, I had no idea what a half one is, so I poured a half glass of Guinness, thinking I had covered my angles. And I was duly told a half one meant a glass of whiskey. And because it was in Roundstone, it meant it was going to be a glass of Powers, because that's just what people drank.
Yeah.
People from Dublin drank Jameson, and people from outside of Dublin drank Powers, and that's the way they saw it. And if you came from the north, you drank Bushmills, and if you came from the south, you drank Paddy, and that's the way it was delineated back then.
Did you start in the pub trade?
I did. Yeah, I was very. I worked in various bars. First one I said was in O'Dowd's in Roundstone, and working for a friend of mine, Nicholas Griffin, and Roy Griffin, his father, and that's where I really learned the power of the bottles, because it being Connemara, working in a bar in November, it can be quiet. So when you're cleaning bottles, you're kind of picking up bottles, and you're reading the back of labels, and you're reading the front of labels, and trying to understand what each bottle was. And that's kind of where I got the interest for alcohol, and that's where. I'd grown up in a shop, so we'd always be meeting people in a B&B. So speaking to people isn't so much of it. I wouldn't say a challenge, but I'm not as. It's a bit more comfortable for me, because we were used to meeting strangers all the time, or customers all the time. So I gravitated toward that end of the business from that. Yeah. I worked my way through different bars as I went along, and I managed a couple of bars, and I went to Australia after that in 1999, having met a woman or a girl from Salt Hill, who is now my wife.
Okay, so glad that has a happy ending.
Yeah, there's always a happy ending to that, and it was we met, and we came back to Ireland then, and I started working for Aircom, which I didn't do very successfully. I wasn't very good at that. And I worked for an energy drink that resembles a bovine animal, and I didn't do very good at that. And thanks to my wife pointing out on an advert on the Irish Independent, Sunday Independent, Irish Distillers recruiting merchandisers. And that's really how I got into the drinks industry. Chance, fate, being pushed in the right direction. And I was there for 13 years.
Yeah. So you started up in merchandising, and how did that role progress?
I suppose, I did that for about 2 years, and I did a thing called brand development, which was like a precursor to an ambassador role.
Because there weren't really ambassador roles at that time, were there?
No, not in Ireland.
Not in Ireland, yeah.
They had the graduate program for Jameson and for Bushmills, and they were being sent all around the world, because obviously when I joined Distillers in 2002, Bushmills was part of the family. The first time I set foot in Bushmills was in April 2002. Right. And that was after having, I think it was like the 6th of April. The day after I met the late, now unfortunately, great Barry Walsh, Dr. Barry Walsh, where I went through the full portfolio, from Coleraine, Dunphy's, through Jameson, to Powers, to what was the precursors to Redbreast and Middleton and the Bushmills range, the full Bushmill range. So I was really fortunate, sir. Just I got an amazing education, unbeknownst to myself as I was doing it.
Yes. Well, that often happens, Yeah,
but my first time in Bushmills was up on the Enterprise from Dublin, arriving in Belfast, myself and two gentlemen, one now working for Diageo, John Bowe, and another Cormac Long working for Tesco, and we were embarking on this kind of brand development career, and no one was talking about whiskey then. Nobody talked about whiskey.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you were in whiskey before people were really talking about it, and I suppose you left IDL and you went to Bushmills. Did you go straight to Bushmills from IDL?
No, like me going into IDL, I went working for a wine firm, which I discovered at a rate of knots that I was terrible at. Right. At selling wine. I just didn't understand it. I didn't get it. It was a very dramatic change of tack for me, to be honest, having gone from selling completely 100% whiskey and spirits to going to selling wine. I had some experience of selling wine in IDL, but nothing to the level that it was expected of me. So we parted companies, and I was looking, and I had my name in for a job at Tullamore Dew, and I had my name in with a job with Bushmills, and Bushmills is the one I went for. Not against Tullamore Dew, is just I'd gone for Bushmills because it meant I could be based in Galway. So yeah, it was.
Oh, it's a big
just a fate, really.
Yeah. What was the reasoning for leaving IDL? I mean, by all accounts, you seemed pretty happy there, and you speak very fondly of your time there.
And I do, and I still do, and it means a great amount to me to watch them kick down the doors of markets and do so very well with Jameson, and well deserved, because they put a lot of hard work into it. Yeah. And I just felt from a domestic, so my role was domestic at the time, and I was on the road a lot. I had two small kids. My eldest son James had kind of experienced me a bit at home, but my youngest son Dara hadn't really seen me at all at home, and it was starting to kind of, family work family.
I think people underestimate the responsibility and the challenges of being a brand ambassador in terms of time away from home.
Yeah, and I was doing it was kind of like a triple role, really, because I was doing the ambassador work. I was a key account manager for the prestige business. I was looking after the 5-star hotels. I had a lot of entertaining of guests coming in. Still some great friends at IDL, Billy Layton. He's still up there. You're still one of the good ones, Billy.
Well, did your paths cross over with Billy in Bushmills? Were you there at the same time?
I wouldn't have known him in Bushmills. I would have got to know him better when he came down to Middleton. So that's where we would have worked a bit on different projects that were happening that I was kind of really lucky to be involved in. So yeah, there was a lot of change, and we did a lot of entertaining. And then I was also an ambassador for the distillery, as not just the brands, but I was the only person from the commercial role. I suppose this is part of your question about the key account piece you're asking me. I was a key account manager in the on-trade in IDL, but I was also representing the distillery in Middleton, doing all the bits and pieces. And I found that a balancing act was really difficult, and something had to give, and family was always going to be my biggest priority. So an opportunity came up in the west of Ireland. There's my mother, a pint and a chaser.
I was wondering, have you sent the family in? So hello to your mother. I'm sure she's very proud of you there.
Yeah. And so, and I have really fond memories of IDL, and I learned so much. But as I said to you in my early part, I didn't realize what I was learning.
Yeah.
I don't think in your late 20s, early 30s, I was kind of turning into my early 30s, and you just didn't know what you were being exposed to. I was being exposed to cask whiskies that nobody was tasting across the island, because we were talking about how to survive as an industry, not how we're growing. How to cope with growth is a very different problem than coping with shrinkage.
It's a nice challenge to have, though, now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it made us. I think if you talk to anyone that kind of was in the industry around the early noughties, you'll find a certain hardiness to them in terms of there's a durability, and there's a reserve. There's a backup there for you because you just came out of that, and then all of a sudden we had the boom had gone bust.
Yeah, sure.
We had to deal with a lot of that. There was a lot of outstanding on accounts, there was businesses folding, and it was pretty horrific. And the Irish publican takes a lot of stick in public sometimes, but their resilience is probably second to none. I mean, we don't have a tourist industry if we don't have these guys. These guys and girls are facilitating people's experiences when they come here. If you go to Galway City, you've got to Galway City. You got to go to the pub. And after you've been to either Connemara or the Burren on a tour, so it's that there. That's kind of. I think I've gone on a tangent there, Sergio. I have a tendency, as I told you, to.
Well, I mean, that's what's so heartbreaking about what's going on at the moment. I suppose the very fabric of what makes Ireland, has been shred to pieces, if you like, with what's happening at the moment. And obviously tourism is gone, and I just feel so much for the public. And I know the government has stepped in to do some measures, but hopefully we will start seeing an opening in the not too distant future. But they've really shown the resilience, and you see now, a lot of online stores coming out of some of the pubs as well, which is nice to see. But walking into a pub,
there are some positive. I mean, there are positives. I mean, it is quite. It's quite hard. It's quite difficult. I mean, my own mother has a B&B, and that hasn't been open for a year, and she has felt the full effects of it. So I know it personally. My own father runs a shop. He's seen that, because obviously tourism has dropped. There's nobody going to Roundstone during the summer, or the numbers have decreased. My own pals who own pubs in various places that I deal with, they're feeling that. But there's a resilience, and I think it may not be quick, but it will come back, and it will come back strong. And I think we've done a great job as an industry to kind of fly the flag. I know the Irish Whiskey Association are working really hard in terms of trying to keep the flag flying, both for Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, in terms of our whiskey industry. If you think about the visitor centres, I look at the visitor centres, in Bushmills, and the numbers that we're going through there, through the Giant's Causeway and whatever, and that's not there anymore in terms of the numbers. So that's quite difficult, because obviously we have a visitor centre in a working distillery, so you can't have people coming through it. So, but there is hope. You see the rollout of the vaccines, and you hope that people will bounce back from this, and I can see it. But I mean, we talk to people. I mean, before Christmas, I think it was October, I spoke to 45 sales reps from Mexico. The following day, I was on the phone. I was on another one on Facebook to 50 bartenders from France, from the south of France. The following week, I'm doing something else with guys in the UK. I'm talking to more people than I could ever talk to possibly.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the big pluses is that your reach and the amount of events you can attend skyrockets really because of this. You know, the reach is there. Of course, it's not the same personally, but you're reaching a bigger audience for sure. And I didn't realize Mexico was one of your. Well, I suppose it makes sense that Mexico would be one of your strongholds.
Well, it was the Jose Cuervo sales team, so you asked the question about the ownership. Yeah, we're owned by Jose Cuervo. Juan Domingo Beckman owns the and the partnership that's there, but he's the company very much see Bushmills as how you said about in terms of how people perceive Bushmills as a big player. The company sees the potential within Bushmills. I think that potential has been reflected from that. You can see the energy that's in Bushmills now, and this has all been done while it's in lockdown.
Well, momentum drives momentum, and there certainly seems to be the momentum behind the business now. And I think, there's a lot of factors there. But when you joined Bushmills, were they still under? They were still under Pernod when you joined, and then 2005, Diageo took them over. What kind of changes did you see when that happened?
Yeah, you see some changes. I mean, when I started in 2002, so I was a merchandiser, green behind the ears. Yeah. Didn't really understand what whiskey was. Knew it was something. Grew up with it. Saw it. Worked with it in pubs. Knew and understood what it was. And you knew that we were the biggest player at the time in the whiskey business in Ireland, and that was pretty much all you knew because there was only 3 distilleries on the island. Yeah. And you're that young, you can't see beyond that. You're not that I was young, but you're kind of naive in the business where you don't see beyond that. You don't see a competition because we were Bushmills and we were Middleton and we were Jameson and we were pretty much the whole lot. And then you had Tullamore and Kilbeggan was starting to make it inroads, and brands like Tyrconnell and Connemara started to make inroads, and then that was the litmus paper, the touch paper that then kicked off. I mean, Mr. Teeling did an amazing job in terms of changing the conversation, and then you saw things change. Yeah. And then you saw things change within, obviously change happened. The most dramatic change happened with Bushmills being sold to Diageo from Pernod. And then, people say that I've heard it called the quiet period. I don't know if that's true or not. All I know is that the distillery flourished.
For sure. I mean, the distillery did flourish during that time, but certainly from outside looking in, it certainly seemed that there was a subduedness, if you like, on the outside in terms of a marketing and a drive to push the products. I'm sure production probably investment was made. And I suppose even in the initial 1 or 2 years when Jose Cuervo took over, I think in 2014, it was a little bit quiet there. But what were those transitions? So you've been through the transition with obviously IDL going to Diageo and Diageo going to Jose Cuervo. How did your role change and what was the atmosphere like? And
it was when I suppose I can only talk about my experience when I started with Bushmills Spirits or Proximo in almost 6 years ago. Yeah. We took over the brand from Diageo. We had to pretty much put our own what we wanted as Proximo. What we wanted from Bushmills and understanding the potential that was there. I mean, people may have been frustrated about whatever they may have been frustrated about, but they weren't privy to what was happening behind the distillery.
Sure. Yeah.
That's just business. I mean, they had we as a distillery, we had to fundamentally know, our direction, our role, what we were going to be about, new ownership, what the direction of the new ownership was. And I think people have seen You don't that and that's like turning an aircraft carrier. You know that old adage, it's done quite slowly.
Yeah.
He he played a bit of rugby too. Thanks, Joe. But when you're turning an aircraft carrier, it moves really slowly. So
Yeah.
Fast growth in whiskey is 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fast growth in gin is a year, 2 years. You can see it very quickly in something like gin, and we've experienced that gin boom. But to grow in whiskey, it takes that 10 years. It takes that time. And I think when you look at it from way we see it as brand owners, what we were dealing with was one of the big three, one of the Holy Grail type brands in terms of the perception of Irish whiskey internationally is Jameson, Tullamore Dew, and Bushmills. Yeah. So we had to be very careful what we did with it. And we had to be very careful to respect the culture that we were coming into and respect the people that worked there and take what their feedback was on board and then develop the brand. And, this, what's behind me here is testament to the level of innovation, new product development. We have a brand new brand from Bushmills, like the Sexton brand, and that's out of the old Bushmills distillery. And you were speaking to Alex, master blender.
We had Alex Thomas on, and I know the Sexton has been a huge success, and I guess maybe was it perhaps the first one that kind of showed signs that Bushmills was really on the up and upping its game.
Yeah, we understand what's been and being is being because it's back there. We're very conscious of what we want to do, what's in front of us, the road in front of us, and it's very clear. I mean, there's an appetite and there's a thirst for Bushmills both internationally and in the Irish market, where it's it's the most competitive Irish whiskey market on the planet, Ireland, because this is where everybody tests everything, launches everything. And we're also a very discerning whiskey public. I think there was a slight bit of amnesia amongst consumers in the 90s around what whiskey and how you drank whiskey. And we've rediscovered that, and we've rediscovered our national spirit because this is what we do. This is the French have champagne. We've got Irish whiskey.
Well, do you think we had lost that affiliation with Irish whiskey for a period, and it's come back, I guess, maybe stronger than ever before now?
Yeah,
I see a change.
I've seen a real change. I've seen a marked change in terms of how people talk to you about whiskey, because whiskey would have just been whiskey. It would just been, I'll have a glass of whiskey.
Yeah.
Or whatever the pour, you go back to the adage I used there, and in the north of the island it was Bushmills, in the east of the island it was Jameson, in the south of the island it was Paddy, and in the west of Ireland it was Powers, and pretty much they were the delineation market areas. So, and that's the story I had when I tended bar back in the 90s, and that's the way you thought about it. But now I walk into bars across the northwest now. With previous times is bars carrying that 30 types of whiskey from 10, 15 types of different distilleries, or distilleries that are on the way, or bonders, which are also very important because they have a role to play. Taking somebody else's whiskey and putting their own twist on it, I think is something unique as well to Ireland. So there's a real attitude change, we're more, I think we like great whiskey. We like paying good prices for it, that kind of way.
Yeah.
We've got really high standards as an audience. I know when I go to a whiskey pub or I go to a pub, I must drive bartenders crazy because I'm very fussy about the glass I drink it of. I drive my wife bananas because we can't go for dinner without me having it has to come in a specific glass. I'm just, well, that's just me. But other people have their own foibles around how they would drink whiskey, and it's the ceremony and the theatre that goes around it. I think we've found that again. The water jug is back on the counter again.
Yeah. I mean, what do you make now, looking around, Seamus? So we're talking, it's probably over 40 working distilleries now in Ireland. When you started off, there were three, at most three. What do you make of it all? I mean, do you think there's one that stands out, or do you think, we're growing too fast? Or do you think the demand is there? What do you make of all of it?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic. I'm kind of jealous of them. Because they're getting to do it for the first time. I'm working with an inheritance. There's a responsibility of centuries on something we do in Bushmills. When I open my mouth about Black Bush, it's a brand that's been around since the 1890s. Whereas if I'm in a new distillery, it's a blank slate. I can write my own story. I can be in that moment with that brand. I think there's a great opportunity out there for them. And, look at my county in Galway. 5 years ago, you had Porrick and Jimmy in the Oslo distilling poaching. But, news last week, they're going to release no whiskey. To me, that's invigorating and gives me a sense of energy, because I could, you take Galway County, it was the one that didn't have a whiskey distillery. I was kind of feeling a bit left out. Why can't Galway have one? And then obviously
have two, McAllister's and Mickle.
Is it McAllister in the Haskra?
That's right.
As well. So that's two in the space of not so short space of time. So it's fantastic. I think it's great. I'm dying to try all this stuff. It's like I said, a busman's holiday, really.
Yeah. Well, you won't have to travel too far then once those two are up and running, which is always a plus.
Well, now there's two sets of Connemara men selling whiskey legitimately now, So it's I'm a North Sider and they're South Siders,
I hope there's not the competition there that there is down here in Dublin.
There'll be no dance fights. There won't be the Sharks versus the Jets. No, it's okay.
But I mean, your area of responsibility originally was you were kind of looking after the whole of Ireland at one point in terms of your account management.
Yeah, I was
side.
looking after all of the Republic.
Yeah.
And my colleague Patrick was looking after Northern Ireland. And when I started, we had to really pretty much reinvent the wheel with what we were doing. I had, to my availability, original Bushmills Black Bush and Bushmills 10-year-old. Our stocks of 16 and 21 weren't. I remember there was a time. Was that when they were under Diageo? There was shortage of 16 and 21-year-old stock. I believe so. So it goes. I'm not fully of a. As I said, when it comes to another company, I don't really kind of. Their commercial is their world, is their commercial world. So but all I know is the reality was we had Bushmills, Black Bush, and 10. And literally I had that in my bag and off I went. And, not everybody said yes. But thankfully a lot more people said yes than no. It took a lot of away from home at the time. But as I went along, it took less time away. And, we grew the brand within the on-trade. It was always very strong in retail. I think that's one thing people you need to recognize. Bushmills was very, very strong in retail. It had a really big role to play within the multiples and within specialist retailers. It just, we needed to kind of get the brand recognized again in the on-trade, and we've seen that in no shortage. So we were able then to get a second guy in, Mickey, into Dublin, another colleague of mine, and then we got Des into Cork.
Right.
So we had a full team, and covering all angles of Ireland and reporting into a guy called Fergal Wilson. And, we were, at the time, we were making up as we went along, and we were trying to figure out what we're doing. And then we got the structure came into place around how we developed the brands, and a real sense of direction started, I think, after that period, that initial period. And
well, it certainly seems to be, if you were to follow the portfolio growth. So, I mean, you've got a smaller catchment area, I suppose, to look after, but your portfolio has tripled in size, which is fantastic.
It's been remarkable. I mean, when you watch it, it's kind of, Then you've got four. We've got four steamships now. You know, the sherry, the port, the bourbon, and the rum.
Well, the rum I have back here, and you know, of all the steamship ones, it's my favorite. Although I like the port one as well, but this one.
Yeah,
here
everybody loves a Bushmills. Everybody loves a Bushmills rum. Something.
Yeah, there was a single cask rum I remember that is fantastic, but very hard to get your hands on.
Yeah, we did one with the Celtic Whiskey Shop when it was in Irish Distillers. A fellow I used to work with, Michael Cunningham, was involved in it.
Right.
But everybody seems to want a Bushmills in a rum. And
yeah, I'm going to have a wee drop of it just for the sake of having it.
For the sake of having one. I'll just put one here. So I'm going posh. I'm going big today. I was going to have something different, but you know, I said I'm going to go with the 21. I've been speaking a lot about the 21 a lot this weather, so why not? Yeah. It's not every day you get interviewed on live stream, so you might as well.
I don't know if that's a reason to celebrate or to commiserate yourself, but anyway, Sláinte, and thank you for joining us on the stream.
Yeah, but then we had the 10-year-old travel retail sherry cask finish. That was a really well received. But obviously, we launched it in lockdown, and nobody was flying, so it'll be there when people are ready to go back. But for me, the real coup de grace was the Causeway.
Well, look, yeah, I mean, the Causeway is certainly the one that's been the tipple point, I think. But I mean, before that, you had the Sexton, the Red Bush, the Acacia Wood came out.
Yeah.
You had then the steamship editions, and
yeah.
I suppose some of the Millennium single castings as well did a lot of good for the brand as well, because I'm sure you hear people are looking for stronger ABV now as well as one of the trends, I guess, that you.
I believe there's a hashtag Cask Strength Crusade.
Yes, I've come across that one. What do you make of all that cask strength? I mean, is it? I mean, I can understand the single cask and some of the cask strength elements, but if people are drinking their whiskey over 46 or 48%, I guess that's their preference. But in terms of creating buzz around the product, you've created the cask strengths with the Causeway collection and some of the.
Yeah, it was one of the things, Sir. Just we were asked when obviously Proximo took ownership of Bushmills, or Jose Cuervo took ownership of Bushmills, is cask strength whiskey, cask strength whiskey, cask strength whiskey. When do you bring in one? When do you bring in one? When do you bring in one? And we'll do it when we're ready. 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 Was our mantra, and we stuck to it. Yeah, because it would have been really easy for us at the start to go, there you go.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that.
And that's not how I don't ever remember Bushmills reacting like that to things. It doesn't react. We don't do things because there's that kind of pressure on us. But we wanted to make sure it was done right. And we wanted to make sure when we were doing it, it was for the right reason that would benefit the brand. And I think when we did it, when we planned it, because this didn't just come about last year or 2 years or 3 years. This has been in the pipeline for a while.
Yeah.
And I think what we've seen is that we used to thanks, Maury, not Brownstone as well. We saw potential for the cask strength whiskey there. Now it's not going to excite everybody, and it's not meant. Whiskey is not meant to be drank at cask strength.
Yeah.
For certain occasions, I think it should be, and there is reasons for that, and there is a cohort of people out there for that. But cask strength whiskey is not for everybody. I mean, unless you know what you're doing with it, then you have to be very careful with it. And most people are, and they're very responsible. But we're also very wary of that. We've a public perception to uphold as well. So, when we released the Causeway, when I saw the initial cask samplings for it, I was really excited, because it was one of the, we were asked at the end of every year, what do you want? I would go cask strength, to a cask strength edition of something. And when I saw it and the guys it came in, I was really, really excited, because I could see we had turned into this other side of the whiskey business that we have played in before. We did this 15 years ago. And that's kind of the other part of this conversation is we were the first ones to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. With the Millennium ones, is it?
What?
With the Millennium release, or it's not the Millennium,
with the single cask, and we had some airport releases in I think in Heathrow with World of Whiskies, and with some releases. So we were one of the first whiskey distilleries in Ireland to do it. We just hadn't done it for 15 years. People, I think, forgot that we had this done before.
Well, I suppose it was a bit pre-boom times. I suppose maybe too early with it. Maybe
we were too early, but we had known there was an appetite for whiskies at cask strength from the distillery. So when we went to the Causeway, we brought out some really wonderful casks, and I mean, we almost myself and the brand ambassador Lauren McMullen, we almost did the two Ronnies act on it. So Lauren would take the Muscatel and I would take the Malaga, because she loved the Muscatel and I loved the Malaga, and it worked really, really well. And I mean, when you watched, I mean, I don't know, you might have been there when Lauren, interesting to say that the public perception of what would be the concern. Interesting to say that they have a public perception of when discussing cask strength. I think it's how it's perceived. Not everybody, Dave, is able to consume cask strength whiskey. It's something that you have to be very careful with, I suppose, when you're.
What's the approachability as well? I mean, it can put off new people coming to the whiskey also. So
you have to be very careful.
Yeah, there are pros and cons to it for sure, but I think.
Sorry, yes, pardon me.
No, I think one of my concerns, I suppose, about the industry is, that cask strength is associated with quality, and which is not necessarily the case. It doesn't follow that if something's cast, and that's just something I think we need to be a little bit cautious of. But there is that perception that you're being innovative if you're doing cask strength, or you're being somewhat upping your quality, when they're not necessarily so at all. But
I mean, you look at it. We had the quality before we released the cask strength. We had the 10, 16, and 21, and if I did euro for every ton.
Let's talk about one of the whiskies. I think that is, if there's a whiskey, or one of the three whiskeys that should be in anybody's cabinet, is Black Bush, right? And I really want to mention that because that is, in my eyes, best bang for buck that you'll get out there for a whiskey, in terms of it over delivers at its price point.
Yeah,
and
it's
a great introduction for somebody wanting to get into sherry influence in a whiskey as well.
Yeah. Black Bush is when I made it no secret, when I worked for distillers and it left, I made sure I had 6 bottles of it before it left the stores. It seems to have got the perception is that it's the hidden whiskey. And it's almost being discovered. It's been discovered by a younger cohort now that have discovered, because it is that little bit older than original.
What is it, 7-year-old?
It's in around that. We don't really count its age, but it's of a significant aging where it's a bit more. We're working with older whiskies and the sherry content, because there isn't a blend that has that level of sherry content like Black Bush.
Yeah, so it's 50%. 50% of the malt is sherry.
Pretty much, yeah. We it's without the figs and the fig rolls recipe. It's in that high proportion. So it's driven by malt, which, unlike most blends in Ireland, are driven by grain. This is driven by malt, and it's the small batch grain that we use, and it brings in that kind of almost like a candied sugar character into the whiskey, like pear drops and apple drops, those kind of boiled sweets characteristics. But the sherry character in it is significant, and I think when people try it for the first time, they're kind of gonna go, oh wow, where's this been? It was the wedding wakes and you've sold a cow type whiskey. I must celebrate. It's one that you indulge in.
So that's what huge majority of that is single malt, or 80.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask for the recipe, but I'd imagine around 3/4 of it is single malt, at least.
Yeah, you're looking in the high percentages of single malt. You know, it's they say 80/20 is the colloquial one that's used, and if people are happy to have that as a number, then that's great. But it's in the high percentages, and it's you know, it's embodiment of what we make in the distillery, which is malt whiskey. So, yeah, and it's seen a resurgence in the last 5 years in particular. We've seen a real change in attitude towards Blackbush, particularly in the on-trade. And with the on-trade closing, we've seen in specialist retailer and in the e-commerce end of the business, Blackbush has kind of moved on as well. So it's reassuring for us that they're not just drinking it in the pub, that they're now, because the pub is not there, that they want to have that taste and they've gone out to buy it. So.
Well, let's see why. One of the reasons I think that the Blackbush has really taken up is the success of this the Blackbush Stories campaign.
Yeah,
and you know, obviously there was some very careful and well thought out collaborations with other brands, if you like, but craft brands. So you had leather, you had cheese, you had tea, you had all sort of woodwork, you know. And I have to say that this Blackbush Stories series, it was probably one of the best branding exercises that has been done. Certainly, I remember going to these and feeling quite old in the company of a much younger audience there, and very successful campaign. And you know, the story of Blackbush is important, I think, because it is such a great entry point in to put you back in. Such a great entry point in to the market. Yeah. So obviously, do you think a lot of that success that you're having now is due to Blackbush?
Yeah, a lot of it would be. I mean, look at it's we work very hard on the marketing side of things as well. I mean, Una, our marketing manager, she's working a lot with different agencies and whatever to try and unlock the potential and behind Blackbush and we've seen it being replicated in our sister company in the UK as well. They've started doing some Blackbush stories as well in places like London and you know, we talk about it here and how it works here is great because you can see the success quite fast because obviously we have a smaller population, but when you see it resonate in a place like London, where the spirit business is so much more intense and you're playing within the world whiskey side of things, not just, you know, because obviously Irish whiskey is the driving force for whiskey in Ireland, but when you're playing up against some of the big boys in Scotland and Japan, particularly the Japanese, particularly the Japanese, which are in vogue in the likes of London, you know you're doing something right. And it lends itself very well to different things, Blackbush. You know, from a food and whiskey. I know it talks a lot about the pairing and, you know.
Well, I think that's what was fascinating for me. What was really encouraging about that one was, and I hadn't really considered Blackbush as a cocktail whiskey, but it does lend itself so very well to the various many different cocktails that are out there. But also the affinity with this kind of branding, I thought, was done really well.
Yeah, and the people we're working with are you know, the word craft gets bandied around a lot, but they're real crafts people. I mean,
absolutely.
Their roles, their jobs are, you know, they're no mean feats in themselves. I mean, the charcuterie and the tea blender and the candle maker, these are crafts as old as making whiskey. So, you know, why wouldn't you pair up with people like this? They're in a like-minded space.
Yeah. But I thought I definitely think it introduced a new audience as well, a younger audience, and I think they're discovering maybe Blackbush for the first time, and then, you know, if you like, they upscale to the other versions. I mean,
I don't like spending too much time on Blackbush because I'm a big fan of Bushmills Original. Sometimes it gets a bit lost under the limelight of Blackbush. And that's equally as good a whiskey for what it is. You know, it's a 5-year-old malt and a 4-year-old grain, and it's almost 50-50 malt to grain, and
yeah, it's a very high malt content in an entry.
Yeah.
Well, entry price.
You know,
I won't say entry
it's
whiskey.
in that entry level.
Yeah.
And I mean, if I don't sell Bushmills Original, you know, you don't turn on the lights the following morning, because that's what pays the bills.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the other ones, because obviously the 10, 16, and 21 have influence of other casks as well. In terms of sherry influence, let's talk about that. Is it País Lovato you work with in terms of getting casks?
Yeah,
and obviously a fantastic cooperage down in Spain there in Jerez. But the casks are slightly different for yourselves, so they're making bespoke casks for you.
Yeah, they're
tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, they're basically large bourbon cask-esque vessels. So they're large. They're not tapered like your typical Spanish sherry, but would be. You know, it's quite tapered at the top. It's slightly shorter but much wider, and we get hogsheads as well brought in. Whether we make them in the distillery, or we get them done for us in País and Jerez. I love saying the word Jerez. I drive them crazy in work, because I get this inkling, a sprinkling of Spanish whenever I say Antonio País Lovato from Jerez. So
not Jerry's though.
They're the casks. They're fantastic. They bring so much. They bring so much into it. I mean, like Sexton is 100% sherry.
Yeah. What age is a Sexton again? Is it? It's quite young, but it's really well rounded.
4 to 5. It's a good end. It's for me, value for money. You're getting it because it's around the 5.50, £6 mark. For a whiskey that's 100% sherry at that price point, there's no whiskey like it. You know.
Yeah.
For people, I try to get people to, when we were introducing Sexton and I was doing it in tastings, is to understand that Sexton is almost trying to understand like whiskey was 60, 70 years ago, because
before we started introducing the bourbon barrels, really was about 1930s.
Nothing came in a sherry. Nothing came in a bourbon barrel. Everything came in a wine barrel. So you had whiskeys that were so visceral, so full of fruit, so full of that depth and quality and that nuttiness. And when you look at some of the vintage whiskies that you get a chance to, and I'm lucky that I've tried some of the older Bushmills, and you get that real richness in it. And I would have tried a lot of the older Powers in particular, and you get that oiliness, that visceral character that comes through. Incredible. But the sherry is very important to us. Like after the bourbon cask, the sherry cask is the main cask after that. Because if you look at, say, something like the 16 or the 21, you know, the backbone to this is American cask whiskey and sherry cask whiskey.
And it's Oloroso sherry, isn't it?
Yeah. So that richness, you know, Fino's too light, PX is too specific. The Oloroso gives a good broad sense of delivery in terms of fruit, nut, depth, color, you name it. Yeah. It comes in waves and spades from the Oloroso cask.
So the 10-year-old is Oloroso ex-bourbon. The 16-year-old is ex-bourbon, Oloroso, and port.
Tawny Port. Finished
so Tawny Port for that. What's the Ruby Port one then? Is that one of the steamship ones?
Steamship is Ruby Port. And the difference is, you know, is almost the same as the differences between Ruby Port and Tawny Port in general.
Sure.
You know, you got that real vibrancy, richness to the Ruby because it's obviously that bit younger. You got real depth and delivery is much slower from the Tawny because it's that much older. So and they react the same way. I mean, everybody. I mean, if I had €1 or £1 for every time I was asked for the Bushmill 16 when I joined, we would have been really, really rich. You know, and it delivers. For me, I can only take 1, maybe 2 Bushmill 16s at a sitting because I find it takes over my palate. It's a very robust whiskey.
Yeah. But I'm a big fan of the 21 is the Madeira finish, isn't it?
Yeah. It's actually it's a continuation and a maturation. It's 2 years and more, a little bit on the Madeira, so it's gone beyond kind of finishing as such, It's more ingrained into the whiskey itself. And we did a fabulous deconstruction of it there about a month ago on the 21, and we tracked the 21 in its lifespan from a 10-year-old malt to a 19-year-old malt to a 21-year-old malt, in its various components, and then finished at cask strength, and then we tried obviously the 21 at 40%, and this is one of the other things about cask strength is there was very little in terms of the drop off. Obviously, in the alcohol was there, but in terms of character, the character from the cask strength 21 to the character to the bottle strength 21 was still there. You still picked up all those notes, and it's the role of the blender. I mean, you're talking about the Helen's job day to day, Helen Mulholland. So it's and
we're starting to see. I mean, I suppose that's what, and again, we're getting greater insight and greater visibility of what's actually going on in Bushmills. We're starting to learn more about the people behind and the people manufacturing this. And Helen's name now is, synonymous with Bushmills. But I suppose, she may have been on the quieter side of kept a little bit behind the scenes. But now it's great to see her out there. And of course, showcasing stuff that she was working on when she came out, when she started in the business. So, that Causeway collection, which I know we all want to talk about, and it's really been, if you like I said, I think it's the kind of point that's brought Bushmills to be spoken about so much. There were inklings coming with the steamships and the Sexton and the Red Bush and the Acacia, but really the Causeway, it kind of shows that you haven't been asleep, and that there has been stuff and planning going on. But what do you make of the success of the Causeway collection? Because I'm sure you've seen people fighting over each other to try and get a collection set together, or specific bottles.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. I look at it with amazement. We pinch ourselves, to be honest, that we're now in sought after mode. Thanks, John. We're when you see it on the auction sites, and we don't design these whiskies, we don't blend these whiskies for auction sites. We
of course not. No.
Put these whiskies aside and put them into a bottle so people can drink them. Yeah. But when you look at it, it's fascinating what's going on. There's a I suppose it's testament. It was always going to happen with the rise of popularity of Irish whiskey, that there was going to be whiskey. There was going to be a category of the industry that was going to be sought after from that point of view.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there were always kind of murmurings that there was great stuff in there in Bushmills in the archives, or maturing there quietly in the background. But to have it delivered in great whiskey and presented so well, I think we're always kind of partly a concern. And for me anyway, personally, it was almost a sigh of relief when they came out and I saw how well they were presented, and it's great that they're sought after. Look, I mean, obviously a lot of them are beyond the price point for me anyway, to be able to go and get all of them anyway, for sure. But did it strike you as a surprise that they would be so successful?
The answer is yes and no, and I'm usually criticized for being very direct. Yeah. In this case, it's a yes and no answer. Yes, shocked that there was this drive and quest to track down every Causeway that was released by individuals. And we've got some really good, some super fans. I mean, the Friends of Bushmills page alone, that seemed to come out of this quest for every bottle that we've ever produced, and it's been fantastic. But yes, quite surprised, and then no, because we make great whiskey, and it's not been boasting or bashful but we make great whiskey. And it was only a matter of time from our point of view that people would witness these whiskies. And we're really lucky. We have a very good distillery, and we've got a good distillery team, under Colm and Helen and Alex, and it's been phenomenal.
How many are in the collection altogether, Seamus? Was it 10?
10 in last year's.
Right.
I think I'm right. The one, I mean, obviously, my main focus is the ones that happen here on the island of Ireland. So,
Sure.
we had the Muscatel here and the Malaga, and we were really, blown away by the response, particularly to the Muscatel. It was about
Yeah.
1,500 bottles, and it was gone within a week.
Yeah.
And that was with lockdown. That was
that the €100 one? The Muscatel,
yeah.
And the Malaga was at 400, I think.
400, and the response to that was equally as impressive. And then I saw the Fayette cask in the UK with our counterparts in the UK in Britain, and that went like that, and we knew we were onto something. It was. But we were bringing out interesting casks. We were bringing out stuff that people wanted to see, like Muscatel, Malaga, Fayette. You make American oak and virgin oak casks for the travel retail one. Banyuls in the Nordics.
I actually don't know how Helen managed to sit in those so quietly for so long. But one thing it does show, and again, you're not the only distillery, but certainly one of the very, very few that had the foresight, if you like, to manage and plan casks so far in advance.
Well, we haven't, but experience is something we're not in shortage of in Bushmills. I mean, we've been, and we've been distilling in the one site since 1784, and we've been distilling in the area since 1608. You pick up little tips along the way, and I mean, I think like we have never made any secret of it. We've got some of Ireland's oldest whiskey laid down in stock.
Yeah.
And people have got a snapshot of what we can do. And it's been great. I mean, I've really, and I get to, we get to talk. I get to talk to people again about something for the reason why I got into it, which is educating around the beauty of Irish whiskey.
Yeah.
I think we do realize, but we don't realize the quality of the product we produce on this island. And I think that's something that, we are as an industry getting louder about how we talk about it in a very Irish way. Not, we're not forceful, and we're seeing that. And the response that we've had with Causeway in the various different countries has been phenomenal.
I think there has been a resurgence of confidence in Ireland in terms of various products that we produce, but I mean no more so than in Irish whiskey,
Yeah.
And I suppose there was a point at which we might have been almost complacent or so assuming of what we were producing. But when you take it abroad and people appreciate it so much, you realize, wow, we have something here that is unique and offers so much potential.
It's like we barely hit the 1 million case mark when I started in 2002.
Yeah.
We're now on 12 million cases.
Yeah. Quite a bit.
And I remember being there at those various celebration points, hitting 1 million cases in the US with Jameson and hitting 3 million cases worldwide with Jameson. And let's face it, it's Jameson that started this ball re-rolling again.
Absolutely.
It's not often that you compliment your competitor. But in this case, it's the elephant in the room, and you have to say that it did start that. But then you saw Tullamore hit the 1 million case mark, and there was a brand that was had small recognition in Ireland, but had huge recognition in the US and in Germany and in some of the Nordics and in the Eastern European countries. And then all of a sudden we started to see growth in Poland and in Germany and in France and now in the US. And it's been incredible. It's what can you say? It's kind of a bit of a roller coaster. It's not meant to be this fast. Whiskey is meant to be slow, steady.
Yeah. But we talk about positioning whiskey for future markets, and I suppose 1920 to 33 you had the Prohibition era in the States, and I suppose Bushmills at the time were they had the foresight, I suppose, to foresee that the prohibition would come to an end, and they built up stocks to go and deliver to the US. So,
Yeah.
That's why I suppose Bushmills has such an audience there. But maintaining that and growing that, of course, they're going to be and have been challenging. But outside of the US, and I know we're talking about much smaller markets, but where do you foresee the brand growth for Bushmills outside of the US?
Look, I mean, we're having great success in Europe, particularly, and I just mentioned Poland. We've seen really significant growth there and interest in Irish whiskey in Poland, not just for us but for other people. Whether it has to be the relationship that Polish people have with Ireland and vice versa, where we had Polish people working here and vice versa. So it's that those habits have transferred. Yeah. We don't go into commercials too much because it's as they say in the business, that's our business. But we've seen really good growth and strong growth, and we're seeing emerging markets like Mexico and South America doing starting to do stuff for us as well. And yeah, it's interesting. I'll go back to the mention of pinching yourself. You kind of go, I'm talking to 45 sales reps from Mexico about Bushmills.
Yeah, great. I mean, when you started off, there was nothing you could have envisaged like this, surely, when you started off.
No. Talking to the sales force in South Africa about Black Bush and the 10-year-old,
Yeah.
Vitaly, don't worry, I haven't forgotten Russia. Russia has it going on. We have significant increase in popularity with Russia as well. And I did a tasting. I think it was in September with Whiskey Club in Russia in Moscow. I wish I was there. I wish I was in Moscow. There's no kid growing up in the 80s who hasn't seen a spy movie that didn't want to go to Russia. It was fascinating. So we went. Hello, David. How are you, my old friend? And we've seen great success there and great interest. So it's been incredible. Look at it. It's constant. It's a roller coaster, Sergius.
Let's talk about the distillery itself, because obviously I think capacity, and there've been rumors of you Bushmills wanting to up its capacity. Obviously, I don't want to pry into commercial arrangements or whatever that's happening, but I know at one stage they were certainly looking for extra warehousing on the I think the old Michelin site. But I just want to, firstly, for anybody that hasn't been to Bushmills, they're missing out, because it's a beautiful village town. It's kind of, what's the population, about 1,000 or so, is it, or is it more than that?
Yeah, maybe around that. It's your typical kind of market town. You've got about 110 people working in the distillery itself. They come from the town of Bushmills. They come from Ballycastle, Portrush, Portballintree, Coleraine, Portstewart, from all around that area.
It's not the ugliest part of the country either. If you can see here, a stone's throw away from the distillery, you've got this fantastic seventh wonder of the world, the Giant's Causeway.
There's a flip of a coin whether the causeway or the burn is the most photographed piece of rock on the island.
Oh yeah, where's your lens there?
Yeah, Connemara is coming up a close third with the amount of stone we have. So yeah, but I think the causeway wins with the hexagonal shaped basalt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, the Sexton bottle, paying homage to that, I thought was fantastic branding. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the distillery itself. This is the old distillery, I suppose. And this is this the one that started in 1784.
Yeah, this is the last surviving building from the 1784 site. This was there was a fire in 1885 which destroyed the still house.
Yeah. But that was rebuilt very quickly, though, wasn't it?
Pretty quickly. Within a number of years, we were up and running again, and so we were still producing whiskey because we had stuff in bond in warehouse. So it stopped us distilling, but it didn't stop us bottling. So Yeah,
Yeah, no,
that's the
I should have
old.
asked that question actually, Seamus. So sorry, I should have asked the question. How has production been affected by the COVID? Are you still producing full capacity now?
We're still producing. The timetable I wouldn't be beyond my pay grade in terms of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, but we're still producing spirit, still bottling, still making whiskey.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the old pagoda roofs. That was the old malt house. So we're malting our own, 20 tons a week. Now we're taking in 300 tons.
Wow.
So a slight change,
I mean, these are iconic photos. And Matt,
Yeah.
I don't think this is a very reflective photo. I mean, I've been in the maturation warehouses and they're huge. And
This is from the emptying line, from the dumping line. So
yeah,
you're seeing as it comes in. So we still rack. We still rack our barrels. We obviously have some palletization, but we still predominantly rack.
right. Okay.
In the old style, 12 high, 12 deep. So that's as it comes in, as it rolling in to come in to be dumped for bottling.
Yeah. And here we have the small still room, but
Small still room.
I mean, they're huge capacity. These stills, so 10 and 15,000 liters, is it?
Yeah, well, the first two sets are 15,000 liter. The last two, the wash and the faint stills are 15,000 liter capacities, and the spirit stills are 10,500 liter.
Yeah, but there are more stills. I thought there were 10 stills altogether. Is there?
There's 10, yeah, 4, and 2.
So okay, so 4 wash, 4 still, and 2 spirit, is it?
4 wash, 4 faint stills, and 2 spirit stills.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And that glass room is only a recent innovation. I don't know how they survived. You've obviously been in the still house in Bushmills. It's like walking into a rainforest. It's just
it is. Yeah. I think I was there. Well, I remember it before that glass room was there as well, and then. The washbacks are upstairs, are they?
Pardon me.
The washbacks are upstairs, are they?
They are. Yeah. So you come down from the washbacks into the still house, so it's quite close, quite condensed. It's a Victorian building, not to forget. So Office of Public Works won't allow any major structural changes, so that's why we built a second still house just off the site, which will be hopefully operational by hopefully July.
And will that be? Will we be able to visit that as part of a tour?
Not sure yet. In the commissioning phase, probably not. As we iron out kinks and as it's going through the testing phase. So it's obviously just recently been completed. So it'll have to be tested and commissioned. And so up until that point, we'll have to wait and see. We don't know yet, obviously, because there's no visitors in the distillery as we speak. So that's not.
You have a bottling hall though as well, don't you?
We do.
You don't just bottle your own.
I think between Britain and Ireland, it's one of the few distilleries, if not the only distillery, with a bottling site on site.
Yeah, I think Tullamore have their own bottling one now as well, and I think yourselves. You don't know any others. Yeah.
So we do bottle there as well, and I mean we've put in more warehousing. If you look at the back of the village now, you can see the green warehouse for the extra amount of casks laid down, just under 400,000 casks. It's incredible. It's a credit to the team, to Colin and Helen and Alex and their team that they're working with. When you go up there, it's fantastic. It's so inviting.
Well, I actually love the tour because it's actually really good value for money as well.
Yeah.
It's a good value tour.
Don't say
Plus,
that.
You have the
price.
Oh, don't be saying that. Don't. But they have one thing there that I'm a big fan is the whiskey marmalade in the store is fantastic. I don't know if anybody's got a chance to try it. And of course, the distillery exclusive, the 12-year-old, which I always think is, gosh, I wish I could get that anywhere.
Yeah.
Because it does change every year. But I've won, I think, from 2013, 2014, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and then we released the Acacia Wood. It's like the 10-year-old with some Acacia finish.
Yeah,
it's not exactly the 10-year-old that we have in the market.
I have
but
that here as well. The Acacia, I love,
yeah.
but the color of the Acacia Wood and the, it's a very different Bushmills to anything. There's a kind of a resin on it almost. It's fantastic whiskey.
In terms of character, it has a kind of a similar. There's a similarity between that and some of the finish that you get from the old 1608 from the Crystal Malt Bushmills. So there's a kind of a red chili character to it that I really enjoy.
That's it. Yeah, there is that heat and spice, but
and when it
sweetness too.
It came out at 47%, so a non-chill filter. I think that was kind of the first time we had laid a hand down saying, this is what's coming. You're seeing something different. And
I remember making the trip, all right, specifically for that release up to the distillery, and came back with a couple of bottles, thankfully. But
well, it's been bringing the Acacia Wood out has been great. I mean, this was the highlight to my career so far with Bushmills.
Well, absolutely. I mean, these two certainly, and I don't joke when I say, look, it was a kind of a relief when I saw them come out, because Bushmills is an institution, really, and I don't mean in its mindset, but it's such a core of Irish whiskey. It would be a shame to have not seen something like this come out. No, especially knowing this is there. So
and it's always known. It's never gone away. It's been there all the time. I think it's one of the true survivors of the whole lot. It's been been through the ups and downs and seen a lot of change. And when you can come out with something as energetic as the Causeway, I know I watched countless releases in my time of different whiskies, but this is the first time I've really experienced a real sense of encouragement from the consumer. I mean, these people are paying, money, significant amounts of money for this, but the energy coming from them, you feed off it as an employee of Bushmills. You can go, wow, there is a demand, there is a thirst, there is a want, there is a need for this kind of whiskey, But this is also part of the risk part, because this was meant to be launched in a trade that was open, Sergio.
Well, that's the other thing, I suppose there's a double-edged sword on this, in that maybe a more thoughtful process went on with the launch of it going online. It maybe had to take a slightly different route and just got a wider audience and a bigger buzz talked about it. I don't know. Yeah,
we had to be creative. That's definitely one thing you could say. We had to be creative. We had to think on our feet. And, we're very lucky. Helen has really, really come into her own in terms of the public persona, and speaking to people online, and her double act with Lauren, our brand ambassador, has been
what a team,
has been the highlight to the whole thing. It's really brought the Causeway brand to life, as in a brand within the Bushmills family. It's found its niche already. Its feet is under the table. It's comfortable where it is. So we've had a lot of fun with it.
Well, I mean, it's great to see the development, and we've kind of got to know Bushmills, I think, a little bit better than we had. The kind of mystery. It's nice to have some mystery and intrigue about what's happening, but I think it's also really great to see that we see Lauren McMullen doing a fantastic job now as your brand ambassador, and Helen coming to the fore as well, and Alex Thomas and Colin Egan and yourselves, of course. But you were very much there at the grassroots, Seamus, in terms of, as a brand ambassador, you kind of let us have a little sneak preview of some of the, what was behind the scenes, and you kind of very carefully hinted at what might be coming without spilling the beans. I mean, I know you were going around with new make spirit in your pocket and shh, don't be telling anybody, but so
there's my friends in the Kilkenny Whiskey Guild. Hello.
Yeah, well, that's definitely one of the most memorable tastings I did. Actually, was the one where you did the Bushmills series and some and less known ones. I at the Kilkenny Whiskey Gulg. I think it was the Dillon bar.
Yeah, we did it in the Dillon with Jimmy and Chris and Cyril and Eddie and every tasting I've done in Kilkenny, they've been so welcoming and we've had such fun, first and foremost. Particularly always seemed to happen when Galway played Kilkenny in hurling.
Yes.
For some reason.
Yeah.
And thankfully Galway have always, more so than not, been on the right side of the scoreline, which is great. And also, coincidentally, Connacht will have played Leinster and Connacht may have come out on the right side of the result. So, I like visiting Leinster for that very reason. But no, in all fairness, the analogy I put it is like robbing apples from an orchard. You're not meant to have them, but they taste so damn good. So what I really wanted people to understand was the quality of the whiskey that was behind all of these wonderful brands like the 16, the 21 that everybody raves about, but also the stuff that goes into original and the stuff that goes into Black Bush. Like it or lump it, they are the blended always seems to get the
and wrongly so, I think. I mean, like I say, as far as a blended with Irish whiskey, I can't, there's maybe two others at that point that I would, reach out at, but a Bushmills Black Bush, and even the standard Bushmills pour is fantastic. It's just,
I mean, when I when I worked for distillers, my go-to was Powers Gold Label. It wasn't any of the further up the line. It was standard Power Gold Label, and you couldn't beat it in terms of flavor, delivery, and profile. Same with Black Bush, same with Original. They are secret gems. There's a lot more to it.
One thing I'm noticing that we haven't seen on the show before actually is, and it just shows, I think, the success that the Causeway Collection, the amount of people actually tagging Causeway Collection in their posts. I mean, we haven't had that before, so it just kind of shows, if you like, the enthusiasm for it. And this is, and I was speaking to other people that love Bushmills as well. This is partly, we knew you could do it, and it's kind of, as I said, it's great to see it.
We brought on that magical mystery tour. We did Dublin, we did Kilkenny, we did Cork, we did Galway. I didn't get a chance to do Limerick yet, but we will. We did Belfast, which was for me it was really important that we got one done in Belfast. It was really important we got one done in the Harp, obviously being our old head office.
So I wanted to quickly touch on that. I mean, your head office was in Belfast, in where the Harp Bar is now, in the Cathedral Quarter. And obviously, one of the things that Bushmills doesn't have a lot of is archival material.
Yeah.
But the reasoning for that was that the head office was bombed in the war, Second World War?
Yeah, during the Second World War, during the Blitz. So obviously, Belfast was a target during the 40-41 Blitz. So unfortunately for that point, that we lost a lot of our records. And it seemed to be a symptom of most of these distilleries. Some of them were destroyed in the forecourts in 21. It's unfortunate, but we've got a really good archivist now, Trevor. He's working really hard and putting it all together. And there's some gems coming out of the woodwork that it's just, you're seeing stuff. And there's bottles. There's bottles from the late 1800s coming out of the woodwork, early 1920s.
Have you tried any of them?
I've tried. I've got my hands on some stuff from the 50s, about as old as I could get.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's fantastic because people are coming up with it, going, "We have this. I have this. Is this any good to you?" And it might be invoices or dockets or what it might be. You see one in there's one for Dromona Castle in a frame in the distillery. So from the early 1950s, it's
actually those old invoices. They're pieces of art.
The calligraphy, the handwriting, the
unbelievable
font, the paperwork.
Well, I mean, people were taken on because of their ability to write neatly.
Yeah, I mean that was part of the skill. If you didn't write neatly, people didn't get the right bill.
Yeah.
If you forgot,
it'd be nice to see. It'd be nice to see some sort of museum to Bushmills in that cathedral quarter or something there. I know you've got the Friend of Hand across the road, which is a museum of itself, which is fantastic.
We've got a lot to do in the distillery, and we have a lot of work there. So we'll go one step at a time. We got asked for new whiskey. We produced it. So you never know. You never know. You can start a hashtag.
You're not going to sit on your laurels with that Recollection or with new releases. What's coming out? Is there a version 2?
Yeah, there's a version 2, and we're busy at work. This weather going through what we've got ahead of us, and it's we've had several video meetings, and it's looking good, and that's really about as much as I can say because you have to wait and see. Is
there a timeline at least you can talk about?
We're looking at H2, so the second half of the year.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Causeway is an ongoing thing. It's not. It wasn't just a once-off. It was a battle cry or a banner to something. It was if you want to call it the experimental wing to Bushmills. It was where we could be a little bit flexible, a little bit more adventurous, a little bit more try something different, give people a taste of something that they may not have never tasted before. And it was one of the things that was obvious to us after we did that kind of whirlwind tour of the island. People were there and they were ready, genuinely ready for a cask strength Bushmills. And you taste the cask strength Bushmills, it doesn't taste cask strength. That's the deceiving part.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah.
Go on.
No. One of the things in terms of capacity, I believe you can do about 5 million LPA a year. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that enough? Or are you looking to expand that capacity? Are you looking to expand?
Obviously, with the development of the new still house, that's going to double, if not triple. So,
really,
that'll be the demand. The demand on the distillery is crazy in terms of market growth, in terms of new markets of developing. Demand for Bushmills, for original Bushmills, is growing, and that's what we want. That's more of that. Then the more Bushmills original we can sell, the more Causeway we can develop, or the more cask series we can develop, or whatever it may be. So it's we need to keep the bus going on original and Black Bush. So,
What I meant to ask you that question then is, with the success of the Causeway collection, and the Sexton to a degree as well, and the distillery exclusive, does that lead to an increase in sales of the base products?
It has a knock-on effect, obviously, because it is the flagship brand. We see it all the time here in Ireland, but there are countries where I've seen it pretty much for the first time. Some places, so it's what brings people into the brand. We don't bring people into the brand at 16 and 21. They're brought into the brand at Bushmills Original. And obviously we've done very well with Red Bush in the US, and that has its fan base over there, and it's doing quite well, and that's all feeding into the main brand. It's incredible.
Well, I mean, Bushmills has had the challenge of COVID like every other distillery on the land, but I suppose the other challenge that you have to face has been Brexit. What's been the impact of Brexit on Bushmills?
Well, without going into, I can't go into too much detail, obviously, but it's because I'm not. It's beyond my pay grade in terms of understanding the full commercial reality of Brexit and what it's done. But obviously, with the North-South arrangement, it hasn't really changed anything so far. Okay. But again, I wouldn't be overly qualified to answer that one. Brexit is obviously brings its challenges in other aspects, but
even in logistics and things like that, and I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's not something I would know much about, Sergio. So I'd hate to give you a wrong answer.
Yeah. Any other challenges that you see on the horizon, or that we need to be aware of?
If our competitors couldn't make good whiskey, it'd be great. If we look at this. The challenges are everybody's challenges. It's how we emerge from COVID, how we respond to the challenge of getting whiskey to market, how we respond to various aspects that are, can be commercially sensitive or otherwise. It's how the biggest one is obviously responding from the emergence of COVID and how we respond to those markets that and the ones that are still in it. It's not everybody's in the same level of emergence. So that's the big challenge, and the big challenge for every distillery on the island. Our visitor centres are still closed, and that's a significant piece of employment that's a challenge to the local environment, local governments, and local economies. These people are earning a wage and they need to spend it somewhere, and when they're not earning a wage, they're not spending it, and that's the simple mathematics of it. So it's difficult, and I'm always very conscious that there's always somebody somewhere in our industry that's not doing what I'm doing because of COVID, and we're always very conscious of that. And we've also, it's a fundamental factor to remember.
Another question I was to ask you was, obviously going around the country and doing so many tastings and showing your produce, how have you seen the audience change and develop over the period of your career?
I've seen the age profile first and foremost. That's changed significantly.
Younger, I presume.
The gender profile has changed so much more, thanks be to God. There's much more women going to tastings than there has been before, because it was it just seemed to be a man-only domain, and it's thankfully changed. And I think that's changed because you've seen the emergence of so many much more prolific female distillers and blenders and bottlers and bonders. That has changed. It's changed the audience interaction more dramatically. And it's not the domain for the male anymore, that it is both male and female. And that to me is one of the most important changes, because it's balanced out things much more. It's a much more easier room to speak to, because you get the greater level of interaction, I think.
No, it's fantastic. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Helen was the first female master blender.
First female master blender. She was the first woman to be inducted into the Hall of Fame in 25 years at the Whiskey Awards. So it's testament to the role she's played. So she's quite a significant role in terms of how women have moved within the industry. Obviously, I'm not qualified to talk being a man. It's we've had it pretty much our own way for so long. It was only a matter of time.
No, but it is fantastic to see. And one thing that was evident, I suppose, again, at that Blackbush Stories, the percentage of women at that event was much higher than you would have seen traditionally. And I think people see the likes of Lauren and Alex and Helen, and they aspire and see that there is space there. And
it's true without the industry as well. I mean, if you look at JJ Corrie, and you look in Middleton, and you look in different brands across the island. Absolutely. It's not just a one-sided affair anymore. It's not male dominated at one end of the business and female in another. It's quite mixed, and it's the way it should be. It's normal. It should never been that way in the first place. So it's great to see, and that's one of the main. And to be honest, when you see them at tastings as well, I mean, that's one of the most significant changes I've seen at the public events. Obviously, the age profile, as you said, the younger audience being there is fantastic, because they're more curious as well, because that's their opportunity to try whiskies that they may not be able to afford on maybe entry-level salaries or whatever. So there's a hunger there to learn, to grow, to become more knowledgeable, and it's great because.
Actually, I mentioned again the Blackbush Stories because I just think it hits such a note. What's the future for those? Are they done and dusted now for the moment, or are they going to come back?
No, they're still part of our brand plan for Blackbush. It's still a major part of what we will be about with Blackbush. But obviously, doing it from a distance digital point of view is a much more difficult affair. It takes a lot more planning. The level of engagement is different, so you have to kind of get these right. So they're currently at plans to try and deliver it from a socially distanced point of view, which is the kind of the key. Because if you know from being at the events, I mean, I remember being at the one in Galway. Yeah, it's quite a hands-on type thing. I was at the Suki Tea one in Galway, and you're blending teas and you're looking at different things, and it's a very hands-on type event.
Well, that's what made them immersive. That's what made them the success I think they were, is that they were immersive.
Yeah, and we saw the knock-on effect from that then as well, where we saw there was a greater level of engagement with Black Bush, and whenever we would do something with Black Bush, it would respond quite well, particularly from the social media. And that is probably one of the other things from the more youthful side of things at these tastings, is you'd see a quicker reaction from them, because they've processed their information and it's now on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be, and there's a hashtag with everything that you can instantly see the reaction that it's had with that customer, that clientele, that person's experience the tasting. Whereas sometimes, when I started doing it, you'd have to walk the room and almost pull information out of people. How did you find it? Did you,
Yeah.
They're not afraid to tell you what they think, which is wonderful. There's a freedom within that is refreshing for me, because I would never have been afraid to tell anyone of what I thought. I would, like I said, I'd be very guilty of saying what I think, and sometimes coming out the wrong side of that conversation. But I enjoyed that, and particularly from a younger audience, because they challenge and they ask and they want to know why and how and where, and it's so.
Does it invigorate you, Seamus? Does it invigorate you to see a new audience and a younger audience, and to see the success? Does it give you a second wind, if you like?
I definitely got a second wind when I came back into Bushmills when I started, because the energy I fed off was this. There was a hunger and a want and a need to know about Bushmills, and then a younger audience started to want to know about Bushmills, and that was brilliant. And then I started working alongside with Lauren, and it's not that you don't need to, it's not a guessing game. I'm older, she's younger, and I see her approach to how she does it, which is very similar to mine, but with a younger mindset. And I fed off the likes of those younger ambassadors, because they bring an energy and an enthusiasm that it's like an agitator in a fermentation tank. It shakes it up again and gets the energy back into it. It brings life back in, feeds oxygen into the system again, and away you go again, because you've got these younger ones snapping at your heels.
Well, I mean, it keeps you on your toes as well, I suppose. Of course,
it does. You can't rest in your laurels. I'd be very, slow to react on a social media point of view. Whereas, some people might send me messages on Facebook Messenger, and I mightn't see it for a week.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, we messaged you and you responded. I know we've been talking about having you on the show for quite a while, and and you did us the honor of writing the introduction to one of our issues in the magazine. I'm very grateful for that, of course. But you are, I won't say you're not thought of as the older statesman, but you're the elder statesman, in terms of you're highly respected in the industry for what you brought to it, and you're always a bit of a straight talker. But who's been your biggest influencers out there in your career? Who have you looked up to, and who's been the biggest influence?
The oldest statesman you've had on, Quinny, John Quinn. I watched his career from afar as I started, but a lot of people. There was a lot of influences for me from people that you mightn't have ever heard of in the whiskey business.
Sure.
One particular man, he had a significant influence on what I did, was a fellow called Martin O'Mahony. He was a regional manager with Irish Distillers, and he gave me a roadmap one day. Martin was famous for writing on imaginary paper. He would write and he would talk. And Martin, very clearly, this is what I think you should do. It's A, B, and C, and this is what I see, and this is the potential I see behind you. And it worked. It worked.
Yeah.
It worked. It definitely worked. And then people like Barry Walsh, God rest him, even though I didn't really know him, I would listen intently to what he had to say. And Billy in Middleton, have a good relationship, and all the team in Middleton, they had a significant. And I don't want to be. It's not like an Oscar award. I want to be thanking everybody.
No. Yeah.
And then I got to know Colin and Helen quite well, and they were very generous with their time when I started with Bushmills. And you feed off their information and their experience, and then I met Alex and her energy around the sexton, and it's just been. You grow. I mean, the greatest form of flattery is stealing somebody else's ideas, and whether someone's stolen some of mine somewhere along the way, it's great. But your work ethic I got from my parents. And my grandparents. We lived with my grandparents. We ran our own family business, and I fed off that. You grow up with that in the house. And I also, on the other side, my dad's from London. He was born and bred in London to Irish parents. So, I learned from them. They had such a hardworking ethic. They started to move to London in the 40s. So when things were pretty rough for Irish people when they moved over there. So
sure.
This all fed into what I use. I can relate to people on different levels. So. It also helps, that I'm as stubborn as a mule.
No harm in that. Sometimes it's needed, of course, but
but I've also learned to switch off from the whiskey business as well. I like my fly fishing.
Well, I meant to ask you, outside of whiskey, what are your interests? Obviously, your family are there, and I presume they're quite important to you, although. They're probably sick of having you at home all the time now at this stage, are they?
Yeah, the two boys are pretty much waiting for me to go. When am I packing a bag to go to a hotel again? My wife is very grateful I'm home, I hope.
So she tells you.
I think it's been a good opportunity being home, and I've got to reconnect at home as well. And but I switch off when I go out the Corrib. I mightn't catch a fish, and my two pals who probably listen to this, John and Dave, we've a trio of. We like to keep in contact via text about what we didn't catch, more so than what we did catch.
Or the one that got away, no?
Yeah, the one that got away, but we're not those kind of anglers. We're pretty much kind of the one we didn't catch. We saw loads of fish feeding, but we didn't catch them.
Yeah.
And then rugby is I coach rugby as well. So. I
didn't know you coach. I knew you played, but I didn't know you coached.
Calling it playing is putting it very lightly. I think the IRFU are glad I stopped. Bad image for the game, but no, I coach under 16 rugby here in Upterard, a small club we set up about 16 years ago. Yeah. And I also manage the regional Connacht squad. So
all right, very good.
Yeah. I enjoy working with kids. I enjoy watching them. And I also contribute as well at Gaelic football with local.
I'm sure you enjoyed the rugby over the weekend. Then that was quite a performance.
It was a roller coaster. Nobody saw that coming, which is great. It was fantastic to watch. I thought they showed great ingenuity. We don't get enough credit for being a footballing nation. And we bring. I think games, contact sports like rugby and Gaelic football suit the Irish mentality. And you could see the interplay between Gaelic games into rugby and rugby on Saturday with the feeling of the high ball and stuff. We're much more comfortable in that kind of game, and we did very well. And well done to the French as well, ruining Wales's parade. I've seen you switched off in Paris drinking. Billy Leighton, you're not meant to be telling what's goes on 2 days on tour.
I'm hoping you'll get the chance to reverse the tables at some point. We get Billy on the show, and you can join in and tell us some stories that we wouldn't have heard. But look,
Billy, I keep my secrets.
Look, the one thing I've garnered from chatting to you and having you on the show, there's a great warmth that's there for you, Seamus. I don't know if you're aware of it that's out there. I mean, you're there almost 20 years, and nobody's said a bad word yet. I know they haven't come on board and said a bad word about you yet, but obviously you're much loved in the industry and been a huge contribution that you have made. How do you foresee, or what do you look forward to most in the next few years, bar COVID going, of course?
No, that's the priority. Hasta la vista, COVID.
Yeah,
we're sick of you now. You can move on. That's the main one. Without being flippant about it.
yeah.
I see great things. I see great things for Bushmills, but I also see great things for the industry in terms of development. It's exciting, Sergius, and I tell you the reason why is because you don't have to be, if you're in the industry for, some of the people that are in the likes of IDL or in Cooley long enough will know that we looked at an industry that was almost closed 15, 20 years ago. Now we're looking at an industry that we're talking about taking back our spot under the sun. Challenging for our Celtic cousins for the hotspot, and it's fantastic to see. It's great to. Hi, Barbara from New York. Hi. It's great to see because this is what we do so well. I've said it before. The French make champagne and cognac, and we make Irish whiskey, which is, for me, probably the best product on the planet because it's ours. We do it in our own way. Our distillery styles are distinctive unto themselves. We've been doing it for centuries. We make it so well. It's understood across the world. You don't need a translator to understand whiskey. You just need a really good nose and a nice palate, and that's really it. And I see great work being done, and I see a lot of great work being done with Irish whiskey distilleries on the island. We were talking earlier about the amount of ones that are opening in Belfast, the ones that are opening in Dublin, Cork, Galway, Limerick. It's
Everywhere.
Everywhere. North up in Donegal, the new Crowley distillery. Kieran Davis and what they're doing there, and the Connacht distillery, and it's there's so many more to know.
Believe you know this lady as well.
Yeah. There's our icon. She's some woman we work together in Irish Distillers. So,
but I think in one sense you have the advantage of having seen the lean years and the difficult years, Seamus. And I think, if you were to give advice or some words of encouragement or some words of wisdom to somebody getting into the business now, what would that be?
Take nothing for granted.
Yeah.
Straight away. Yeah. Don't presume anything.
Yeah.
Don't presume because you have the number one title or the emerging title that things are the way they are. You've got to stake your claim in everything you do. I'm a child of the 70s, so we saw the late 70s, early 80s. Not a great place to be in Ireland, and everything had to be fought for, and you fought for everything, and that's kind of stuck with me. You don't let someone else take your bread, but
Seamus, if I was old enough to remember the 70s, but I'm a few years on you. Unfortunately, I do remember them, but they were
Do you remember the 60s? No, that was me.
I just made the 60s by the skin of my teeth. 69, so
1974.
You're only a young kid.
Barry White was in the charts. My first, my one, the only. I just don't presume anything. Just because people say wonderful things about you on the internet or your brand on social media, whatever, you never take anything for granted. You fight for everything.
Well, in this modern era, things change on a dime,
Yeah, and I think it's you gotta be in your corner. You have to be looking for the next opportunity all the time, and that's really, look at. I mean, there's no real pearls of wisdom as such. It's just get up in the morning, put your feet in your boots, and go, and keep going. It's a busy industry, you know. It's the whiskey business is something that we're seeing a resurgence in now, and it's been great.
Yeah, well, long may it last, but I suppose not resting on the laurels is important as well. And you know, look, Seamus, I won't keep you. I won't keep you too long. I just wanted to say thank you from my point of view. You've always been really. What I like is your straight talking. You know, whenever I'm listening to you, you know, and the experience that you have, it's a privilege to listen to you when you're presenting, and even with the passion that you talk about whiskey, whether your own brand or others as well. The whole sector is, I think, lifted by what you bring to it. So from that point of view, I just want to thank you and wish you another at least 20 years of success in the industry. And then you can start fly fishing more full time and maybe enjoy a dram without any sales obligations. So
yeah, well, you know, we always have a hip flask in the fishing bag somewhere, you know, and
I'm sure there's one or two there. Yeah,
that's kind of when you're in a place that's safe. It's good to do it, you know. Thank you for the invite. Firstly,
well,
really
look, no, we've been dying to have you on, and we were very grateful that you did, and very grateful for the contribution that you do make, not just to Bushmills, but I think the whole sector. And you know, Galway as well, I'm sure are very proud of you there as well. So look, Sláinte. Look forward to actually meeting in person, and we'll catch you soon.
Absolutely. Talk to you later.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shane.
Bye.
Bye. Well, thank you very much for joining that show. I hope we got an insight into just what a wonderful contribution Seamus has made to the industry, and really his work ethic and his openness and honesty and his professionalism are really to be given great commendation. So thank you for joining the show. We've another interesting chat lined up next week with a slightly younger gentleman, if that's possible, and look forward to catching you then. So look, if you've enjoyed the show, please do subscribe to the channel. It does help a lot, and give us a like, and we shall speak to you next week. Thank you very much. Good evening.